Hi, Kim Sealing-Smith with Ignite Global here. I was recently asked to give my #1 tip for interviewing well. Well, I got so excited about that I decided to create this short video with not only my #1 tip, but 3 common pitfalls that I've seen hiring managers fall into. You know, hiring well is something that I am passionate about, and you'll know that if you've ever heard me speak or if you are a regular follower of my blog, or certainly if you know me. So few hiring managers do it well. In fact, Hudson just recently released a study that showed that 44% of the people that they surveyed rated their last hire as not good. Astounding! Absolutely astounding. Now, I know some of that can be chalked up to the fact that a lot of hiring managers are still interviewing for skills instead of behaviors. Big mistake, especially in this critical skills shortage, which is just going to get worse. So, how do you interview well? Well, since I do advocate interviewing for behaviors, it's not surprising that the main interview questioning technique, I teach 5 of them, but the main one that I teach is behavioral-based interviewing. Now, I know that there's been screeds of information and loads of training on behavioral-based interviewing, but I really think that this is something that has gotten convoluted and confused over the years. Behavioral-based interviewing, I love behavioral-based interviewing because, you know, I love this graphic. It's a graphic, obviously, of the stock market. And the reason why I use this for behavioral-based interviewing, if you've ever bought a share of stock or a share in a mutual fund or a managed fund, and if you were geeky enough to read the prospectus, undoubtedly you'd seen at the end of the prospectus the disclaimer. So after they give you all of the song and dance about what a great financial instrument it is, they tell you, but past performance is not indicative of future results. Well, guess what? In interviewing, past performance is the only thing that's indicative of future results. It is truly not about what the candidate would do. Candidates know how to answer your questions. It's about what the candidate did do, because what they did in the past is the only indicator of what they'll do in the future for you when they're working in your area. It's not rocket science, behavioral-based interviewing. It's really easy, and if you've done any study on this at all, you'll know that it's really simple to structure behavioral-based interviewing questions. All you have to do is start the question with something like, tell me about a time when, or give me an example of. Like I said, it's not rocket science. Why then do so many interviews go so poorly? Because of 3 common pitfalls that I've seen managers fall into time and time again. So I'm going to tell you about these pitfalls, and then I'm going to tell you how to avoid them. The first one is to structure behavioral-based questions in situational clothing. I've seen this happen over and over again. Hiring managers think that they're asking the candidate to tell them about a specific example, but the way they ask them, they give the candidate permission to tell you what you would do. Tell you what they would do. So you say, how would you handle, or have you ever? Now that's too general of a question. You truly need to drill down into the detail. My remedy for this is to pre-plan your interview questions. Come up with a list of characteristics that you need to see in the role and a list of questions about that specific candidate, and make sure that they are structured to elicit specific examples and not generalities. Most hiring managers go into interview situations without a list of pre-prepared questions. Shocking, I know, if you're one of those that do, but I've seen it happen time and time again. So don't let that happen to you. Pre-prepare the question and make sure that you're not asking behavioral-based questions dressed in situational clothing. The second pitfall that I see is seeding the answers that you want to hear directly in the questions. In one of my recent workshops, one of my participants said, I've got a great example of a behavioral-based interview question. You see, I teach them to use different words than the characteristic that they're looking for. So he was looking for the characteristic of persistence, the behavior of persistence. And he said, I've got a great question for that. Tell me about a time when you got stuck. Well, that is a great question, because they have to talk about how they got stuck and how they got themselves unstuck, how they were persistent. Terrific question. But then he let himself down by adding to it, and did you ask for help? Now, the entire room burst out laughing, including that participant, because as soon as he said it, he heard that he was seeding the answer directly in the question. He was telling the candidate with a big neon sign on his forehead that he was looking for a candidate who would go for help. You'd have to be a fool not to say that you would go for help, or not to give an example of where you did, or fudge it a little bit. So that's the second pitfall. The third and most common pitfall is failure to hold their feet to the fire. What do I mean by that? The devil is truly in the details here. When people want to fudge the truth a little bit, they fudge it in generalities and not specifics. So if I wanted to lie about what I did over the weekend, I don't know why I would, because my weekend was actually quite boring, but I might say, oh, I caught up with friends. I wouldn't say, I caught up with my friend Kathy and we went down to the harbor and we went to Joe's watering hole and I sat there watching the boats come in and drinking margaritas all afternoon. I wouldn't paint that specific a picture. So if you get them to answer 6 questions for you, who, what, where, when, why, and how, we learned these in school. If you get them to answer those 6 questions for you, you'll know that you'll have an added comfort level that what you're telling you, what they are telling you is the truth. The comfort level just ratchets up a little bit. So get them to be specific. Hold their feet to the fire. When you ask those specific questions, make sure that they give you specific answers to that. So that's my top tip in structuring a great interview. Use properly structured behavioral interview questions and then avoid those 3 pitfalls. Happy hiring!